are Heather and Paul Christie.
And for over 12 years, we've worked with executives and entrepreneurs to accelerate change in every aspect of their business.
Because we are in the fastest paced business environment that anyone has ever seen before.
So join us for the Evolve to Win show. Hi, and welcome to another Evolve to Win show with Heather and Paul.
Do you really know what drives you to take action?
I do.
You do?
I do.
How do you know?
I know because I've taken assessment before and figured it out.
Okay, good. Well, do you really know what drives you to take action? Because the answer is most people don't. And we're going to talk to you today. This is sort of an introduction, an opening to human motivators and why it matters to you, right?
Yeah, and it's so important because we go around with these hidden motivators that nobody else can see. Mm-hmm. We can only see the actions that we take that result from the motivators that really are the reason why we're doing it.
Yeah, they're
why
fuel.
We're taking that action, right? It's the fuel. But there are a handful of motivators that everybody has that are in combination with each other, that are different from each other, that are different from each other. And we need to understand who and what these motivators are, or really what these motivators are for each individual, so that we can help them to achieve the best possible outcome for themselves.
Yeah. And so we're going to give you some specific examples, because I know that if you've never really thought about motivators before, or you've never studied motivators, this can be sort of up there at that theoretical level. So we're going to bring it down to like some real life practical issues. But I want to start off with a little bit more maybe context for why this matters for you, because I think this is a really, really big deal, especially if you're in a manager leadership position. Because when you think about leadership, all leaders are really there to influence change, right? Because you don't need to be a leader to talk someone into staying where they are. So leadership is all about influencing change.
So wait a minute. A leader, you don't need to be a leader. Or wait, what did you say?
We don't need leaders.
We don't need leaders
to talk us into staying where we are and doing the same stuff.
Right. So if I'm content where I am, and I mean, you don't need to talk me into that. No. I'm
you're
there already. You're
going to keep doing what you're doing, your way of doing things.
So but a leader needs to inspire somebody to be able to change and take action.
Right. Oh, and you might even say motivate someone
to
take action, right? Yep. And if we all have these very specific combination of motivators, wouldn't it be like almost necessary to know what someone's grouping of motivators are so that you know how to influence them in a much, much easier way?
Well, I think all of us have run into people that we know may be similar to us in the way that we behave, but they do things for different reasons. And we can't figure out why they're not, they appear to be the same person, like very similar and very similar. They're friendly, they're outgoing maybe, they're maybe driven to do something, but they are motivated differently from how we are or how I am. And sometimes I can't figure that out. Like, why are they doing things in a different way?
If you ever catch yourself saying, why did she do that? Or why did he do that the way he did? That's probably a motivator, right? That's something that's beneath the surface. So
a quick example, right? So a quick example is, is somebody who, and I see this all the time, people who are very, very, outgoing, giving type of people, altruistic type of people that go out and they will help anybody, anytime, just for no reason. Like, and I look at them and I say, well, they seem like great, really nice people, and they're very helpful to others, but they will just go out and do that just on their own free will. And they're totally satisfied by it. Mm-hmm. And I look at it and I'm like, I just don't, that for me, I just don't go out and do that. I'll help somebody if they need help. Don't get me wrong, but I will not just do it indiscriminately. Yeah. I will not just go out and look for that opportunity to be helping people all the time. I have to be asked, or the opportunity has to come about, right?
Yeah.
So I see this all the time, especially down here where we live. There's a lot of charitable organizations. There's a lot of places where you can give. And I see people that are, and we certainly give a lot, in our time and in, in donations and things like that. But there are people who just love to be a part of an organization that give nonstop, volunteer for everything, right?
Well, and sometimes those who are the people who tend to give a lot all the time, there are so many wonderful aspects to having that as a pure driver, right? And yet what you also have to watch out for is burnout, right? Because that same motivator, someone who has that in a lot of strength, they have a really hard time saying no.
Yeah.
So they'll serve others for any reason. And sometimes they really want to say no, but they don't say no because they're so motivated to help and support others that then they end up taking on too much and they can't actually be of as much service as they want to be because they've spread themselves too thin. So the other thing that's really interesting about these motivators, we're not going to go over them today. We are going to take them one by one in different sessions. So we keep it really streamlined and very simple, and you can understand each of the 6 core motivators. And you'll start to figure out how you relate on one end or the other of the continuum. So every motivator has this continuum. And you either, so as in Paul's example, you've got someone who really, really, really likes to give to other people for the sake of giving. And then somebody who's on the very other side of that motivator will really specifically, intentionally help people for a purpose, right? And sometimes that purpose is connected to achieving a goal at work, right? But there's more of a specific and intentional way of helping people, or there's a I help everyone for any reason all the time.
Right.
So every one of these motivators that we're going to share with you each week, we're going to show you, we're going to tell you what the motivator is all about. Then we're going to tell you what this continuum looks like. So not only are you going to start to identify some of these for yourself, but you're going to start to see them in other people, and you're going to find out when you react to some of the actions that other people take, because anytime we have a whole lot of strength on one side of the continuum, chances are really good that someone who's on the opposite side of that continuum is going to be a frustrator for us.
Right.
So another quick example to share what that might look like. When you think about how you use your time, your effort, your energy, your money, that continuum has somebody who's all the way on one end where they want a return on investment for everything. Then there's the other end of the continuum where, time doesn't really matter to me. So somebody with a time doesn't really matter to me, if you're in a business setting, and let's say that we're having a meeting.
Yep.
Let's say that you are very, very specific about not wanting to waste time for any reason.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say I'm on the opposite side and time's not that important to me. What I'm really interested is I want to come up with the best idea that serves our clients. Now, there's not a good or bad, there's not a right or wrong, although you might think there's a right or wrong, because usually we identify with the way we like to do things.
Right.
But imagine you go into this meeting and you've got a boss who just is not concerned about time and doesn't feel like having a spitballing kind of conversation would be a waste of time. And every time you go into a meeting with that person, if you get into what feels like a good conversation with that boss, they will keep it going and going and going. So even if your meeting was only scheduled for 30 minutes, it could go 45, it could go an hour. It might be 90 minutes later and we're still spitballing. And if you've got one person who's really, really conscious about not wasting time and always wants to get into action, and you've got another person who just feels like we're right on the verge of coming up with the right solution, can you imagine the level of frustration between those two?
Well, on both sides too.
Yeah.
So it's not making one person wrong. So if while you listen to that story that I was telling your example, and you are somebody who's very time conscious, and you are you know when a meeting starts and when it should end, and you don't like to waste time.
You probably don't like meetings at all. If
You're listening to that other person who wants to spitball, and you're like, oh gosh, please don't put me in a meeting with that person. And
if you're
this person, you're looking at that person who's, just always time conscious, is like, oh, this person's always in a rush. They don't really want to get to the bottom of this. Like, we could really do good work together, and you're making each other wrong. So this is where understanding people's motivators and what motivates them, and these 6 different motivators, basically 6 motivators that we have, is that once you start to understand those, you can stop making people right or wrong for who they are. And a lot of the motivators that we have are blended together too. So you don't see them specifically perfectly, but they are blended together.
Yeah. And that's what makes it really difficult. And okay, first of all, they're hidden.
Yeah.
And second, we all have a different combination of these motivators. So the different combinations mean something different for how each person is motivated to want to take action. So, this science was developed starting back in 1928 by Edward Springer when he came up with those original 6 motivators. And this science has evolved, and there are people who have been working on this for decades. And so we're really clear at this stage what these 6 motivators are and what they mean in the workplace. But I want to just go one more level further from a place of leadership, because I think this is a really, really important conversation. Gallup just released their State of the American Workplace report in fourth quarter last year. And this is the report that you might have heard of before on employee engagement. And if you've listened to this podcast before, you've heard us talk about this before. It's a big issue, right? Employee engagement is a big issue because we do not have engaged employees in the workforce in America. We are really losing that battle, okay? But here's the good news. In this most recent report, Gallup found an 18-year high for employee engagement. Now, before you run out and get the party hats to start celebrating this, you really need to know what this study says, because here are the new numbers. So employee engagement right now, this is in the US. Now, the global statistics do not differ that much, but there is a separate global report. So if you're dealing with global leadership, pull both reports, please. But I'm talking about the US report for right now. And we're at an 18-year high with, drum roll please, thank you, 34% of our U.S. workforce is engaged. So when they talk about it being engaged, they're talking about people who actually want to go to work, people who want to do a great job, people who might even come in early or stay late because they're so connected with the mission of the company and they want to work for this organization. It's not hard to tell who's engaged in your workplace because they have incredible results. They have incredible energy. They're very positive. Then the rest of them, 66%, are not engaged, and they break the disengaged into 2 different buckets. They've got the disengaged and they've got the actively disengaged. So disengaged basically means that you are, satisfied at best with your job, but essentially you are showing up every day to do the least amount of effort possible to pick up that paycheck and not lose your job. And that's about it. So there's nothing exciting or compelling about that person who literally is just showing up to get the work done, to get the paycheck. But that's kind of what disengaged looks like.
Right.
Actively disengaged, so we've got 53% that are at that disengaged level that I just talked to you about. We have another 13% of our U.S. American workforce that is actively disengaged. These are people who hate their jobs. These are people who are actively trying to undermine those who are actually doing a good job, those engaged employees. These are the people, when they call in sick, the rest of the office is having a party because they really don't want this person to come to work. They're so negative all the time. So 13% of our workforce is actively disengaged. All right, so digest that information for a moment. Most people, when they hear those statistics, especially if you're in an executive leadership role or you're the owner of the company, you're like, well, thank God our company doesn't reflect those same statistics. But the question is, are you sure about that? I mean, what if it's even close? The thing that really freaks me out about this whole engagement is it's the people in the middle. It's that 53% that show up just to get the paycheck. Why does that freak me out? Because they're flying under the radar. Most of the leadership don't actually know whether they're engaged or disengaged. That's frightening. And so if you don't know, how is it that you're tapping into these people to get them back to that level of engagement? So what's the other good news about the statistics?
So the other good news is that managers and executives are the highest engaged group of people.
So managers and executives, from a percentage perspective, are the highest level engaged out of the group of employees that have been surveyed. They come in at a whopping 38% engagement. Managers and executives, 38% engagement. Okay, so that, I say, is our biggest problem, clearly, because there is a direct correlation. In fact, I found on page 179 of the report, there's this thing that they call the cascade effect. And I think this truly is the key to what we're looking at here. Employees who are supervised by highly engaged managers are 59% more likely to be engaged than those who are supervised by those who are actively disengaged. There is a direct correlation between a manager's engagement level and their direct reports engagement level. So where do we need to focus? Clearly, we need to focus on the managers. So Heather, what does this have to do with motivators? It has everything to do with motivators, because when you think about how do we get these managers to be more engaged, how do we create this culture of engagement, you've got to go to the managers who are working with the frontline employees. And the way to get them more engaged more quickly is you got to know what motivates them, because that's what makes somebody passionate about the work they do.
Yeah, but I mean, there are people, I mean, in hiring process, sometimes they're not making sure that the person's motivators are in line with the job role that they have. Yeah. I mean, there's many people in the workforce, and a lot of that 52% and this other 17% are filled with people who are doing jobs that are not aligned with their motivators and their behavioral styles.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely, and they're unhappy. Yeah. And, you know,
how can you be engaged in a job
if it doesn't fulfill you?
Like if you are not able to use your strengths that are really natural, that are in your flow, if you're not able to use your strengths in your job and you're constantly having to do things that are just outside of your flow and outside of your wheelhouse, it's going to be tough to stay engaged.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that that we work with, and I'll ask them, what is your hobby? What is the thing that you love to do outside of work? And they'll tell me something that's completely opposite of what they currently do at work in their job role. And I always wonder, like, if they had their choice, would they be doing that, something similar to what their hobby is, because it's more in line with their motivators and their behavioral styles than what the current job is. Sometimes we get stuck in job roles that just because we studied them when we were young. We made a decision when we were teenagers or young adults on what we thought we would be good at. And maybe we've changed, or maybe our motivations are different now.
Yeah.
And I think that contributes to it.
When you chose a career, why did you choose the career you chose at your young age? Or even like right now, when you think about the career that you're in, did you choose it because it was the right fit for you, because it allowed you to really, really explore and expand on your strengths, because it was something that you're really passionate about? We were just reading a book called Game Changers by David Asprey. Right. And he gave this question. He's like, you want to figure out what your passions are? He said, I want you to put yourself in a situation. Let's say that you have $1 billion and everything's good with your home life, with your family. What do you do now? And it was really interesting. So we had a long conversation about this. So what would we do? What would we do differently? And we really were forcing ourselves, pushing ourselves to explore what we would do. And we came back to the answer that we'd keep doing what we're doing because it really fits and we have different motivators. We have some similar, we have some different, but the roles that we play fit the motivators so well that there was nothing.
There's a lot of alignment there, which makes it easy. And that's the thing. If you're really struggling in your job or your role, and it's not necessarily the organization or your boss or whatever it could be, but if you're just not happy with it, it's probably because there's a misalignment there in your job role and your behavioral styles and what motivates you, the why behind why you take action.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, I've worked with executives in the past, and I'm still currently working with some right now, where they literally would have been listed as disengaged or maybe even actively disengaged, and they're high level executives. And yet part of the reason for their disengagement was exactly what you just said. They were misaligned in their role with their core motivators. But here's what's really interesting. Once they understood their motivators and really started to develop their leadership purpose based on those motivators, so I have one executive I'm thinking of in particular. He recognized that he actually is in a role that suits each of his motivators, but he wasn't focused on that. He was focused on some of the negative aspects. Once he shifted his perspective and he got more aligned in his role with his motivators, his job looked completely different to him. So I don't want you to think that if you're feeling frustrated right now in your role, that it's automatically a misfit. It may be that you haven't gotten intentional enough about understanding what motivates you and what drives you to take action and aligning that with your current role. So all hope is not lost. In fact, you may find in going through this series that you really start to get more connected with what drives you to take action, what your passions are, what your motivations are. And you might find other ways to tap into that at work that become really, really engaging and satisfying for you. And hopefully you're in a leadership role and that engagement then rubs off on your team. I mean, it's what the cascade effect.
Yeah, I mean, the total cascade effect. If a leader is engaged with their team and really is in a discovery mode of finding out what truly is hidden underneath, what motivates this person, because it's not always, people act differently at work. They're more of their adapted mode of, well, this is who I need to be. They're almost like an actor in a movie. They're one person when they're at home, and then they're a completely different person. They're acting to be somebody else at work. And so you don't really know who that person truly is until you get
to the holiday party.
Yeah, until you get to the holiday party, exactly. And then, but even if you can see different behavioral styles from home and at work, you can't see what motivates these people. And a lot of people, unless you've take an assessment where you understand what your motivators are, some people don't even really know what they are. They kind of have some clues, but until it's broken down, and the thing that I love about the studies and the work that we've done and the assessments that we have is that they are able to pinpoint and make it clear as day to people to help them understand exactly what motivates them so that they can start aligning themselves with either, if they're in a leadership role, that they can start using their motivators to help motivate others and really understand, because once you understand yourself, then the next step is to really start to understand others so that you can adapt to that, both in motivators and in your behavioral style. But
we call that dynamic adaptation.
Yes.
Dynamic adaptation.
Right.
Everyone say it together. All right. Well, maybe we've made our case for you. Hopefully that you are interested, you're excited to learn a little bit more about these 6 core human motivators and really start to think about what they mean to you. I can promise you, for Paul and for me, it has been an absolute game changer to understand our motivators and really to understand what motivates each other, because we tend to think that other people are motivated how we're motivated because we don't know different. And that's a mistake that could really create friction if you're not careful. So keep tuning in and let us know what you find about your motivators and the impact that might be having on you currently. If you're not connected with us yet, please go to heatherchristie.com. You can connect with us and sign up for our leadership list. And if you want to see this series too on YouTube, you can either check out our YouTube channel, search for Heather Christie on YouTube, or even the Wooditch Network carries the podcast on video as well. So, and if you like this, Gulf Shore Business has this podcast.
Absolutely. And if you like this, like the show, please share it. And thank you for joining us for another Evolve to Win show. Have a great day.
Have an awesome day.